Welcome back. In this video, we'll start with a full summary of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the story that introduced millions to the wizarding world. Then, we'll take you behind the scenes to reveal how this quiet debut became a global sensation, breaking records, surviving backlash, and transforming publishing forever. Stick around, this is the origin of a legend. For nearly 11 years, Harry Potter lived in a cupboard under the stairs, hidden away from a truth that could not be suppressed forever. To the outside world, he was nothing more than a thin, quiet boy with unruly hair and second-hand clothes, a burden to the relatives who raised him. But in the world he had never known, Harry Potter was already famous, celebrated for something he did not remember, for surviving something no one else had. There had been a war in the shadows, one that ended with the fall of the darkest wizard of modern times. On that night, when spells shattered a home and left only a crying child behind, something changed. Not just in the magical world, but in the balance between life and death, good and evil. The name Harry Potter was etched into history, whispered with awe and uncertainty by those who knew what had been lost, and feared what might return. Unaware of any of this, Harry grew up in silence and ignorance, marked by a lightning-shaped scar and a future waiting to unfold. But on the eve of his 11th birthday, a letter would arrive that would break the silence. It would tell him he is a wizard, that he has a place at a school called Hogwarts, and that the story everyone else knew about him was only the beginning. This is not a tale of destiny fulfilled, but of choices made. Of friendships forged in the face of danger, mysteries that lie beneath trapdoors, and a boy learning not just who he is, but who he must become. The magical world is about to open its gates. Now before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a deep dive into the wizarding world. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Lived. The story opens with a depiction of Vernon Dursley, a seemingly ordinary man who leads a normal life with his wife, Petunia, and their infant son, Dudley. The Dursleys live at number 4, Privet Drive, in the quiet town of Little Whinging, Surrey. Vernon notices unusual occurrences on his way to work, people in cloaks, a cat reading a map, and talk of someone named Harry Potter. Confused and alarmed, Vernon attempts to dismiss these anomalies. That evening, Albus Dumbledore arrives on Privet Drive and meets with Professor McGonagall, who has been observing the Dursley household in her animagus form, a tabby cat. They discuss the recent defeat of the dark wizard Lord Voldemort, who murdered James and Lily Potter but mysteriously vanished after failing to kill their infant son, Harry. This event has led to widespread celebration in the wizarding world. Rubeus Hagrid soon arrives on a flying motorcycle, carrying baby Harry, who survived Voldemort's attack with only a lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. Dumbledore explains that Harry must live with his aunt and uncle, the Dursleys, to ensure his protection. Despite McGonagall's concerns about the Dursleys' treatment of the child, Dumbledore insists it is necessary. They leave Harry on the doorstep with a letter explaining the circumstances. The chapter introduces key characters and establishes the initial contrast between the magical and non-magical worlds. It sets the foundation for the larger narrative surrounding Harry's past and his significance within the wizarding community. Chapter 2. The Vanishing Glass. 10 years have passed since Harry was left on the Dursleys' doorstep. Now nearly 11, he lives a neglected life in a cupboard under the stairs and is treated poorly by his relatives. Harry is small, thin, and wears Dudley's oversized hand-me-down clothes. The Dursleys spoil their son Dudley, who bullies Harry and shows no kindness toward him. On Dudley's birthday, the Dursleys take Harry and Dudley, along with Dudley's friend Piers Polkiss, to the zoo. During the visit, Harry is surprised when he speaks to a boa constrictor and seems to understand its thoughts. Moments later, the glass of the snake's enclosure vanishes, allowing the snake to escape. The snake slithers away, thanking Harry as it does so. The Dursleys are furious and blame Harry for the incident, despite his claims of innocence. As punishment, they confine him to his cupboard for an extended period. This chapter establishes Harry's isolated upbringing and the beginning signs of unusual occurrences tied to him. It also introduces his first recorded interaction with magic, though he does not yet understand its nature or his own identity. The incident at the zoo foreshadows his future connection to the magical world and indicates latent magical abilities. Chapter 3: The Letters from No One. As summer progresses, Harry begins to receive mysterious letters addressed specifically to him, written in green ink and addressed to his cupboard under the stairs. Vernon Dursley intercepts the first letter before Harry can read it and becomes increasingly agitated as more identical letters begin to arrive in larger quantities and through increasingly unusual methods, including through the mail slot, the chimney, and even hidden inside eggs. In response, Vernon relocates Harry first to Dudley's second bedroom, then moves the entire family to various locations to evade the letters. Despite his extreme efforts, including boarding up the house and fleeing to an isolated hut on a rocky island, Vernon fails to stop the letters. As midnight approaches on the eve of Harry's 11th birthday, Harry lies awake on the floor of the hut, counting down the seconds until his birthday. At the stroke of midnight, there is a loud knock at the door. This chapter highlights the persistence of the magical world in trying to contact Harry and the Dursleys' escalating attempts to avoid it. It emphasizes the increasing tension in the household and sets up the imminent entrance of a major character who will change the course of Harry's life. Chapter 4: The Keeper of the Keys. At midnight, Rubeus Hagrid bursts through the door of the hut on the rock, startling the Dursleys. He is revealed to be the Keeper of Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Hagrid presents Harry with his long-awaited letter, officially inviting him to attend Hogwarts. Harry learns the truth about his parents. James and Lily Potter were a witch and wizard, respectively, and were murdered by the dark wizard Voldemort. Hagrid explains that Voldemort's curse rebounded when he tried to kill baby Harry, causing Voldemort's disappearance and leaving Harry with his lightning bolt scar. The Dursleys had never told Harry any of this, choosing instead to lie about his parents' deaths and suppress all knowledge of magic. Hagrid becomes furious when Vernon insults Dumbledore and attempts to deny Harry his magical birthright. He uses magic to give Dudley a pig's tail before announcing that he will take Harry shopping for school supplies in London the next day. Hagrid reassures Harry that he is famous in the wizarding world for surviving Voldemort's attack. This chapter marks Harry's introduction to the magical world and his identity as a wizard. It establishes key backstory elements about his parents, Voldemort, and Hogwarts. The arrival of Hagrid and the official Hogwarts letter initiate the transition from Harry's neglected life to his journey into the wizarding world. Chapter 5: Diagon Alley. The next morning, Hagrid and Harry travel to London to purchase Harry's school supplies. Hagrid introduces Harry to the Leaky Cauldron, a wizarding pub, where Harry is recognized and greeted warmly by patrons who acknowledge his fame. Hagrid leads Harry through a hidden entrance into Diagon Alley, a bustling magical marketplace. They first visit Gringotts, the wizarding bank run by goblins. Hagrid takes Harry to his family vault, where Harry discovers he has a substantial inheritance left by his parents. Hagrid also retrieves a mysterious package from Vault 713 on Dumbledore's instructions, though its contents are not disclosed to Harry. Harry then shops for school supplies, acquiring robes, books, a cauldron, and other essentials. In Ollivander's wand shop, he learns that a wand chooses the wizard. After trying multiple wands, he is ultimately chosen by a wand made of holly and phoenix feather, twin to the wand that gave him his scar. Hagrid gives Harry a snowy owl as a birthday gift, which Harry later names Hedwig. Before they part ways, Hagrid advises Harry about returning to the Dursleys until school begins and hints at the importance of the package he retrieved. This chapter serves as Harry's full introduction to the magical world, including its economy, institutions, and norms. It establishes his connection to his parents' legacy and introduces foreshadowing regarding the mysterious object from Gringotts and the shared core between his wand and Voldemort's. The opening 5 chapters of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone trace the dramatic shift in Harry Potter's life from obscurity in the non-magical world to tentative entry into a hidden society of wizards. The narrative begins with a focus on secrecy and contrast, the magical world's quiet celebration of Voldemort's fall juxtaposed with the rigid normalcy of the Dursleys' life. This early duality introduces the thematic conflict between the magical and non-magical Muggle realms, which remain central throughout the series. Chapter 1 establishes the foundational mystery of Harry's past, his parents' death, Voldemort's defeat, and Harry's survival, deliberately withholding details while hinting at deeper magical politics. Chapters 2 and 3 present Harry as an outsider within his own household, treated with disdain and ignorance by the Dursleys, reinforcing his alienation and foreshadowing his eventual transformation. The magical elements escalate subtly. A disappearing glass at the zoo, an unexplained ability to talk to snakes, and the relentless arrival of letters that defy Muggle control. These episodes serve as narrative markers of Harry's suppressed magical identity breaking through. Chapter 4 acts as a pivotal turning point. Hagrid's entrance is not only physical but symbolic, the sudden, forceful reintroduction of Harry into a world that has known him all along. For the first time, Harry hears the name Voldemort, understands the significance of his scar, and learns of his parents' true fate. In Chapter 5, the narrative expands spatially and culturally. Diagon Alley introduces readers to the breadth of the magical world, its institutions, Gringotts, Ollivanders, and its economy. The scene with the wand is especially significant. The connection between Harry's wand and Voldemort's plants a subtle yet crucial narrative thread. The retrieval of the secret item from Vault 713 hints at deeper conflicts and responsibilities awaiting Harry. The next sequence will transport Harry from the realm of discovery into the domain of learning and belonging. His departure for Hogwarts in Chapter 6 will introduce key figures, both friends and rivals, who shape his future. The train ride serves not only as a literal journey but a metaphorical transition from isolation into community. Upcoming chapters will begin to outline the social structure of the magical world through the Hogwarts house system, provide insights into magical education, and deepen the mystery around the object hidden in Gringotts. These developments will lay the groundwork for alliances, adversaries, and the central plot of the Philosopher's Stone. Chapter 6. The journey from Platform 9 3/4 on September 1st, Harry departs the Dursleys' home and travels to King's Cross Station, where he is instructed to find Platform 9 3/4. Confused by the platform number, he observes a red-haired family, the Weasleys, disappear into a wall between platforms 9 and 10. Molly Weasley kindly assists Harry, teaching him how to access the magical barrier. On board the Hogwarts Express, Harry shares a compartment with Ron Weasley, Molly's youngest son. They quickly become friends, bonding over Ron's experiences as a wizard from a modest background and Harry's unfamiliarity with the magical world. During the journey, they are visited by a trolley witch selling magical sweets. Harry buys a large amount and shares them, sampling various wizarding candies including chocolate frogs and Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. Harry also meets other students. Neville Longbottom, who has lost his toad, and Hermione Granger, a Muggle-born witch with a strong academic disposition. Draco Malfoy, accompanied by Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle, tries to befriend Harry but insults Ron and expresses disdain for non-pureblood wizards. Harry declines the offer of friendship, resulting in immediate animosity from Draco. Upon arrival at Hogsmeade Station, the first-year students are led by Hagrid across the Black Lake to Hogwarts Castle, glimpsed for the first time towering above the cliffs. This chapter introduces key student characters and begins establishing inter-student dynamics, especially between Harry, Ron, Hermione, Draco, and Neville. The journey marks Harry's physical and symbolic transition from the Muggle world to his new life at Hogwarts. The initial conflicts and alliances foreshadow long-term relationships and rivalries that will shape the course of the narrative. Chapter 7: The Sorting Hat. Upon arriving at Hogwarts, the first-year students are met by Professor McGonagall, who explains that they must undergo a sorting ceremony to be placed into one of 4 school houses: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, or Slytherin. As they wait outside the Great Hall, the students are nervous, unsure of what the sorting process involves. Inside the hall, the enchanted sorting hat performs a song explaining the traits of each house. One by one, students are called to sit on a stool while the hat determines their placement. The ceremony reveals the school's emphasis on courage, loyalty, intelligence, and ambition through the qualities of each house. Hermione Granger is sorted into Gryffindor after a brief hesitation, and Draco Malfoy is sorted instantly into Slytherin. When Harry is called, the sorting hat deliberates, noting his potential for greatness and suggesting Slytherin. However, Harry silently pleads not to be placed there. The hat honors his request and sorts him into Gryffindor. Ron Weasley also joins Gryffindor, as does Neville Longbottom after a moment of indecision. Once sorting concludes, the students enjoy a magical feast while ghostly figures, house ghosts, introduce themselves. Harry meets nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost. During the meal, Harry sees Professor Snape for the first time and feels a sudden pain in his scar. Hagrid is seated at the staff table, along with Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, who gives a whimsical welcome speech. Dumbledore concludes with his signature nonsensical phrases, adding a sense of mystery to his character. This chapter firmly situates Harry within the Gryffindor house, aligning him with future allies and rivals. The Sorting Hat's internal conflict over placing Harry in Slytherin establishes a recurring theme of choice versus destiny. Snape's intense stare and Harry's reaction foreshadow deeper enmity and unresolved past conflicts. Chapter 8: The Potions Master. Harry begins his first week at Hogwarts and is introduced to the school's daily life, including classes, magical subjects, and the enchanted layout of the castle. He quickly notices that staircases move and that corridors can shift, sometimes leading to dead ends or hidden rooms. Peeves the Poltergeist causes regular disruptions, while caretaker Argus Filch and his cat, Mrs. Norris, patrol the halls. Classes include herbology, history of magic, taught by the ghost Professor Binns, charms, and transfiguration, the latter taught by Professor McGonagall. Harry is impressed by her ability to turn her desk into a pig and back again. Most lessons are demanding, and Harry finds himself struggling with the volume of new information. Harry has his first potions class with Professor Snape in the dungeons. Snape immediately singles Harry out, criticizing his fame and questioning his knowledge in front of the class. Harry responds uncertainly to Snape's pointed questions about potion ingredients, prompting Snape to further belittle him. The experience leaves Harry feeling humiliated and puzzled by Snape's hostility. Ron and Harry also notice that Snape seems to favor students from Slytherin house, particularly Draco Malfoy. Later, Harry receives a letter from Hagrid inviting him to tea, where Hagrid expresses sympathy over Snape's treatment of him. During the visit, Harry notices that Hagrid tries to hide something in a newspaper about Gringotts, the break-in that occurred the day after they visited the bank. This chapter further develops Harry's adversarial relationship with Snape and introduces the idea that Snape may have a personal vendetta. The mention of the Gringotts break-in ties back to the object Hagrid removed, foreshadowing that it holds significance in the overarching mystery of the school year. Chapters 6 through 8 transition Harry from an outsider entering the magical world to a student becoming immersed in the structured life of Hogwarts. These chapters emphasize foundational elements of the Wizarding School, social dynamics, magical learning, and interpersonal conflicts, while planting seeds for future narrative developments. The train ride in Chapter 6 introduces Harry to key companions and rivals. Ron Weasley, with his open personality and large family, quickly becomes Harry's first true friend. Their easy rapport contrasts with the tension that emerges when Draco Malfoy attempts to assert social dominance by invoking blood status. Harry's rejection of Malfoy and alignment with Ron and the Weasleys establish his stance on equality and foreshadow future house rivalries, particularly with Slytherin. The sorting in Chapter 7 solidifies character affiliations and moral trajectories. The Sorting Hat's hesitation over placing Harry in Slytherin, despite recognizing qualities that fit, introduces a critical theme of personal choice. This notion, that Harry's decisions shape who he becomes, recurs throughout the series. The introduction of Professors Dumbledore and Snape at the head table sets up central figures of wisdom and enmity, respectively. Snape's immediate reaction to Harry, and the pain in Harry's scar upon seeing him, hint at deeper layers of conflict yet to be explained. Chapter 8 introduces the structure and tone of daily life at Hogwarts, contrasting the thrill of magical discovery with the tension of authority and challenge. Snape emerges as a particularly antagonistic presence. His personal dislike of Harry, rooted in undisclosed history, adds complexity to the school's faculty dynamics. Meanwhile, Hagrid's loyalty to Harry provides a warm counterbalance. The subtle detail that Hagrid is hiding something about the Gringotts break-in signals that the mystery surrounding the object he retrieved is ongoing and increasingly relevant. The next chapters will continue to build on school dynamics while introducing new settings, such as the Quidditch pitch, and explore rule-breaking, house competition, and deeper mysteries. The growing tension around Snape, the suspicious events surrounding the Gringotts vault, and Harry's increasing awareness of his past and powers will begin to converge. Themes of bravery, trust, and suspicion will be tested as Harry and his friends navigate their first serious confrontation with school rules, and possibly something far more danger. OUs. Chapter 9, The Midnight Duel. As the school year progresses, Draco Malfoy continues to provoke Harry. During a flying lesson with Madame Hooch, Neville Longbottom injures himself, and Malfoy seizes Neville's Remember-All. Despite being warned not to fly unsupervised, Harry pursues Malfoy through the air and retrieves the stolen item with an impressive aerial maneuver. Professor McGonagall witnesses this and, rather than punishing Harry, introduces him to Oliver Wood and recommends him as the new Seeker for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, the youngest Seeker in a century. Draco, angered by being upstaged, challenges Harry to a wizard's duel that night. Ron agrees to serve as Harry's second. Hermione, disapproving of rule-breaking, attempts to stop them but ends up locked out of the Gryffindor common room with them, and Neville joins after being unable to remember the password. The group sneaks through the castle after curfew, avoiding Filch and Peeves. Malfoy never shows up for the duel, and the incident is revealed to be a trap. While escaping, the students stumble into a forbidden corridor on the third floor and discover a massive, three-headed dog guarding a trapdoor. They narrowly escape detection and return to their dormitory. Hermione reprimands the boys for their behavior. Harry, however, is more intrigued by the guarded trapdoor, suspecting it may be connected to the object removed from Gringotts. This chapter strengthens the friendship between Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville through shared risk. Harry's skill on a broom highlights his natural talent, while the incident with the dog shifts the story from school mischief to a more serious mystery, introducing the first clue to a deeper plot within Hogwarts. Chapter 10, Halloween. As October progresses, Harry begins Quidditch training under Oliver Wood. He learns the rules and responsibilities of the Seeker position. Meanwhile, Hermione grows increasingly critical of Harry and Ron's behavior, particularly their disregard for rules. Her attitude isolates her from the other Gryffindors. On Halloween, the school hosts a feast. Earlier that day, Ron insults Hermione, unaware that she is within earshot. Upset, Hermione spends the afternoon crying in the girls' bathroom and does not attend the feast. During the celebration, Professor Quirrell bursts into the Great Hall, shouting about a troll in the dungeons. The students are escorted back to their dormitories, but Harry and Ron realize Hermione does not know about the danger. They decide to find her. In the bathroom, they discover the troll has already entered. Despite their inexperience, Harry and Ron fight the troll. Ron knocks it out by using the levitation charm to drop its club on its head. Professor McGonagall, Snape, and Quirrell arrive soon after. Though initially angry, McGonagall acknowledges their bravery. Hermione lies to protect them, claiming she went after the troll on her own and that the boys were helping her. As a result, Hermione is no longer isolated. The incident forms a strong bond between the three, marking the beginning of their friendship. This chapter demonstrates the trio's courage and resourcefulness. It also raises questions about Professor Snape, who Harry observes returning with an injured leg, suggesting he may have been involved in something unrelated to the troll attack. This suspicion, coupled with the guarded trap door, deepens the overarching mystery. Chapter 11. Quidditch. The chapter opens with Harry preparing for his first Quidditch match against Slytherin. Gryffindor hopes to win the match and improve their house standings. Hermione helps Harry by creating a fire to warm his hands before the game. The match is attended by most of the school, including Hagrid, Ron, and Hermione. During the game, Harry displays impressive skill as Seeker, maneuvering quickly and effectively. However, his broom suddenly begins to act erratically, attempting to buck him off. Hermione, suspecting sabotage, uses binoculars to observe the teachers and notices Professor Snape staring at Harry and muttering under his breath. Believing Snape is cursing Harry's broom, Hermione rushes to the staff stand. She knocks over Professor Quirrell while lighting Snape's robes on fire to break his concentration. Immediately, Harry regains control and recovers, eventually catching the golden snitch in his mouth and winning the match for Gryffindor. After the game, Harry, Ron, and Hermione discuss the incident with Hagrid. They express their belief that Snape is trying to steal whatever is under the trapdoor guarded by the three-headed dog. Hagrid denies the claim and inadvertently reveals that the creature is named Fluffy and belongs to him. He also lets slip that the object Fluffy is guarding is related to someone named Nicholas Flamel. This chapter intensifies suspicions about Snape and furthers the central mystery involving the trapdoor. It also introduces the name Nicholas Flamel, which becomes the next focal point in Harry and his friend's search for answers. The sequence emphasizes both danger and teamwork, reinforcing the trio's growing bond. Chapter 12. The Mirror of Erised. As Christmas approaches, most students return home, but Harry remains at Hogwarts. Ron also stays behind. The castle becomes quieter, and the boys enjoy the relaxed atmosphere. During the break, they continue researching Nicholas Flamel but make little progress. On Christmas morning, Harry wakes to find presents, including his first ever Christmas gifts. Among them is an anonymous gift, a silvery cloak identified by Ron as an invisibility cloak. A note attached states that it once belonged to Harry's father and advises him to use it well. That night, Harry uses the cloak to explore the restricted section of the library in search of information about Flamel. While evading Filch, he stumbles into an unused classroom and discovers a large, ornate mirror, the Mirror of Erised. When he looks into it, he sees himself surrounded by his deceased family, including his parents. Disturbed yet drawn to the mirror, Harry returns the next night and finds Ron. When Ron looks into the mirror, he sees himself winning house and Quidditch accolades, his deepest desire. This contrast reveals that the mirror reflects the deepest, most desperate wishes of one's heart. On Harry's third visit, Dumbledore appears. He explains that the Mirror of Erised is not meant to be used repeatedly, as it shows dreams, not reality. Dumbledore warns that it has driven people mad and says the mirror will be moved. When asked what he sees, Dumbledore responds vaguely, saying he sees himself holding a pair of woolen socks. This chapter introduces the concept of inner desire and emotional longing. The mirror acts as both a magical artifact and a symbol of loss, hope, and temptation. Dumbledore's presence underscores the lesson that some truths must be faced rather than longed for in illusion. Chapters 9 through 12 mark a deepening of both the central mystery surrounding the Philosopher's Stone and the emotional and psychological stakes for Harry and his friends. As the narrative matures, the story begins to interweave school adventures with significant moral and personal discoveries. In Chapter 9, The Midnight Duel, Harry's natural flying ability and his boldness during the forbidden third-floor encounter demonstrate emerging leadership and courage. The three-headed dog introduces a tangible obstacle, clearly guarding something valuable, while Malfoy's manipulation confirms his ongoing role as a foil to Harry. This moment marks the group's first direct encounter with a mystery that goes beyond school rules and into a larger magical intrigue. Chapter 10, Halloween, cements the trio's friendship through shared risk and bravery. The troll attack forces Ron and Harry to act on instinct and protect Hermione, while Hermione's decision to lie on their behalf signifies a shift in their dynamic. This act of mutual loyalty establishes the trust and cooperation that will define the group's future successes. The momentum continues in Chapter 11, Quidditch, where a seemingly celebratory sporting event becomes a venue for danger. Harry's broom incident and Hermione's quick thinking again highlight the team's interdependence. Snape's role grows increasingly suspicious, and Hagrid's careless mention of Nicholas Flamel connects earlier events, especially the object from Gringotts, to something larger and hidden. Chapter 12, The Mirror of Erised, shifts the tone from action and inquiry to introspection. The introduction of the mirror expands the emotional scope of the book, delving into themes of grief, longing, and identity. Harry's exposure to the illusion of family raises the stakes on a personal level, contrasting with Ron's desire for recognition. Dumbledore's enigmatic guidance reinforces the idea that knowledge and desire must be handled with care and restraint. Having now been introduced to the name Nicholas Flamel, Harry and his friends are poised to make connections between Flamel, the object guarded by Fluffy, and the Philosopher's Stone. The trio's bond has been tested and strengthened through trials involving both physical danger and emotional confrontation. The chapters ahead will expand on their investigation, introduce Quidditch competition in greater detail, and bring them closer to uncovering the truth about what is hidden at Hogwarts, and who might be trying to steal it. As the mystery tightens, themes of trust, secrecy, and temptation will become increasingly prominent, and the stakes will rise accordingly. Chapter 13. Nicholas Flamel. Following the events surrounding the Mirror of Erised, Harry, Ron, and Hermione resume their search for information about Nicholas Flamel. After weeks of unsuccessful effort, the answer comes unexpectedly when Hermione finds a reference in a library book. They learn that Flamel is a legendary alchemist over 6 centuries old and the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone, a magical object that grants immortality and turns any metal into pure gold. Realizing that the object hidden beneath the trapdoor is the Philosopher's Stone, the trio concludes that someone at Hogwarts is trying to steal it, most likely Professor Snape. They believe he is attempting to find a way past the creature guarding the stone, Fluffy. Harry begins experiencing pain in his scar again, particularly during Quidditch practice. Before the next match, against Hufflepuff, he notices that Snape is refereeing. Concerned, Harry suspects this may give Snape a direct opportunity to harm him. However, the match proceeds without incident, and Harry quickly wins by catching the snitch. After the game, Harry follows Snape into the Forbidden Forest and overhears him having a heated conversation with Professor Quirrell. Though he cannot hear everything, Harry believes Snape is trying to coerce Quirrell into helping him access the stone. The chapter advances the mystery by connecting the Philosopher's Stone to the previous clues, solidifying the trio's suspicions and introducing the possibility of internal betrayal within the school. Snape's ambiguous behavior continues to cast doubt on his intentions, while Quirrell's involvement suggests that more than one person may be entangled in the unfolding plot. Chapter 13, Nicholas Flamel, marks a significant narrative turning point. The previously disconnected threads surrounding the Gringotts break-in, the guarded trapdoor, and Harry's broomstick incident converge with the discovery of Flamel's identity. With this revelation, the central mystery is no longer abstract. The Philosopher's Stone is real, present within Hogwarts, and vulnerable. The stone itself introduces key themes: the pursuit of immortality, the ethical boundaries of magical power, and the temptation of eternal life. Though this magical object is central to the immediate plot, it also reflects larger questions that persist throughout the series, particularly the corrupting nature of unchecked ambition, a trait repeatedly associated with Slytherin House and figures like Voldemort. Snape remains the primary suspect in the eyes of Harry and his friends. His secretive behavior, antagonism toward Harry, and unexplained injury all contribute to this view. However, the overheard conversation between Snape and Quirrell introduces uncertainty. Snape appears to be pressuring Quirrell, but without context, the nature of their exchange remains ambiguous. This narrative choice deepens the theme of unreliable appearances and prompts readers to question the straightforwardness of character roles, especially the assumption that hostility equates to villainy. The continuation of Harry's scar pain reinforces the idea of a mystical connection between Harry and external threats, though the cause is not yet understood. The presence of the pain during specific encounters adds tension and suggests that the threat to the stone, and to Harry himself, is imminent. With the identity of the object confirmed, the focus of the narrative shifts toward protection and urgency. The introduction of Quirrell into the equation complicates the trio's assumptions and broadens the field of suspicion. As the next chapter introduces a dangerous magical creature, the line between innocent mischief and active involvement in a dangerous conspiracy becomes increasingly blurred. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are no longer passive observers. They are now investigators, choosing to involve themselves directly in matters far beyond their academic roles. The consequences of this choice, and the limits of what they can handle, will soon come into focus. Chapter 14, Norbert the Norwegian Ridgeback. Hagrid's fascination with dangerous magical creatures escalates when he acquires a dragon egg from a stranger at the Hog's Head pub. Harry, Ron, and Hermione observe as Hagrid incubates and eventually hatches the dragon, a Norwegian Ridgeback he names Norbert. The dragon rapidly becomes unmanageable and dangerous, even biting Ron and causing his hand to swell painfully. Keeping Norbert's secret becomes increasingly difficult. The trio learns that it is illegal to own dragons in Britain and that Hagrid has broken wizarding law. To resolve the situation, they contact Ron's brother Charlie, a dragon handler in Romania. Charlie agrees to take the dragon and arranges for some of his colleagues to retrieve it from the astronomy tower. Harry and Hermione undertake the late-night mission to deliver Norbert. They succeed in handing the dragon off to Charlie's friends but are caught by Filch on their way back. Unbeknownst to them, Neville had also been wandering the halls to warn them and is caught as well. As punishment, Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Draco, who had tried to catch them in the act, receive detention. The consequence reinforces the school's disciplinary system and foreshadows further entanglement with forbidden parts of the castle. This chapter illustrates the trio's growing willingness to break rules in service of what they believe is right, even as it highlights the consequences of impulsive action. Hagrid's recklessness and emotional attachments create complications that directly impact the students. Meanwhile, the appearance of the stranger who provided Hagrid the egg, mentioned only in passing, hints at a larger manipulation at play. Chapter 15. The Forbidden Forest. As punishment for being caught out of bed, Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Draco are assigned detention with Hagrid in the Forbidden Forest. The task involves investigating a wounded unicorn, whose blood has been found on the forest floor. The students are split into pairs, Harry with Draco, and Hermione with Hagrid. Neville accompanies Fang, Hagrid's boarhound. In the forest, Harry and Draco encounter a hooded figure drinking the blood of a dead unicorn. As the figure approaches, Harry feels a sharp pain in his scar. A centaur named Ferenz intervenes, chasing the figure away and rescuing Harry. Ferenz explains that unicorn blood can sustain life even if one is close to death, but that such an act comes at a terrible moral cost. Ferenz suggests that the attacker is trying to stay alive until they can use the Philosopher's Stone to achieve immortality. He implies that the attacker is Lord Voldemort, surviving in a weakened form. Harry begins to grasp the reality that Voldemort may be trying to return to power through the stone. This chapter significantly raises the stakes. The threat is no longer theoretical. Harry has come face to face with a creature tied to Voldemort. The revelation that the unicorn blood is being used for unnatural survival connects back to earlier signs, the pain in Harry's scar, Snape's injury, and the increased urgency around guarding the stone. The forest setting adds a sense of foreboding and mythic symbolism. The centaurs, speaking in riddles and celestial references, underscore the gravity of the threat and introduce themes of fate and prophecy. Ferenz's protection of Harry also signals that elements of the magical world are aware of his importance and are choosing to intervene. Chapter 16, Through the Trapdoor. As the school year nears its end, Harry, Ron, and Hermione grow increasingly concerned that someone, presumably Snape, is close to stealing the Philosopher's Stone. After a chance conversation with Hagrid, they learn that the mysterious stranger who gave him the dragon egg had asked how to calm Fluffy, the three-headed dog. Realizing that the intruder now knows how to bypass the first obstacle, the trio rushes to warn Dumbledore, only to find he has been called away from the school. Convinced the theft will happen that night, the trio decides to act. With Neville trying to stop them, Hermione reluctantly uses a body-binding spell on him so they can proceed. Under Harry's invisibility cloak, they pass through the trapdoor, beginning a series of magical challenges. Fluffy, Hermione plays music to put the dog to sleep. Devil's Snare, a magical plant that ensnares them, Hermione uses fire to make it retreat. Flying Keys, Harry uses his Quidditch skills to capture a specific enchanted key. Giant Chessboard. Ron sacrifices himself in a dangerous life-sized game of wizard's chess so the others can advance. Troll, a knocked-out troll lies in the room, suggesting someone has already passed through. Potion Riddle, Hermione solves a logic puzzle to choose the correct potion that will allow her to return safely and Harry to advance. Harry continues alone into the final chamber, expecting to face Snape or another professor. Instead, he encounters Professor Quirrell. This chapter escalates the story from investigation to confrontation. The trio must use their individual strengths, Hermione's intellect, Ron's strategy, and Harry's bravery, to overcome magical barriers, demonstrating their growth and unity. The final twist, Quirrell's involvement, challenges the assumptions built over the course of the book and sets the stage for the climax. Chapter 17. The Man with Two Faces. In the final chamber, Harry confronts Professor Quirrell, not Snape, as the true antagonist seeking the Philosopher's Stone. Quirrell reveals that he was the one attempting to kill Harry during the Quidditch match and that he let the troll into the castle on Halloween. He also confirms that it was he, not Snape, who tried to curse Harry's broom, and that Snape had actually been attempting to protect him. Quirrell explains that he has been following orders from Lord Voldemort, who is sharing his body. On the back of Quirrell's head, concealed beneath a turban, is Voldemort's face, weak and parasitic but sentient. Voldemort urges Quirrell to use Harry to retrieve the stone, which has been hidden in the room by Dumbledore using the Mirror of Erist. When Harry looks into the mirror, he sees himself finding and pocketing the stone. Mysteria. Sly, the stone is transferred into his actual pocket, a magical safeguard set by Dumbledore to reward those who seek the stone selflessly. Voldemort orders Quirrell to kill Harry, but when Quirrell touches him, he experiences excruciating pain and his skin burns. Harry's touch proves fatal to Quirrell, a result of the protective magic left on Harry by his mother's sacrificial love. As the confrontation escalates, Harry loses consciousness. Harry awakens in the hospital wing, where Dumbledore explains that the stone has been destroyed to prevent its misuse. Dumbledore also clarifies that Harry's survival was due to his mother's protection and that Voldemort fled when his plan failed. The school year concludes with Gryffindor awarded the House Cup after Dumbledore grants last-minute points to Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville for their actions. Harry returns to the Dursleys for the summer, aware that the magical world and his challenges there are far from over. The final chapters of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone bring the novel's major threads into alignment, culminating in a thematic convergence of identity, morality, and the power of choice. The reveal that Professor Quirrell, not Snape, was the true threat recontextualizes much of the narrative, particularly the trio's misinterpretations and the novel's layered use of misdirection. At the heart of Chapter 17 is the revelation that Quirrell has been hosting Lord Voldemort in a parasitic, half-life form. This literal embodiment of corruption underlines the novel's persistent theme that evil often hides behind masks, politeness, timidity, or authority. Quirrell, perceived for most of the story as weak and stammering, represents the danger of underestimation. His character challenges the superficial assumptions the protagonists and readers make about trust and intent. Harry's confrontation with Quirrell and Voldemort also emphasizes the theme of choice. When Harry looks into the mirror of Erised and sees himself retrieving the stone, he does so without desiring to use it. Dumbledore's enchantment ensures that only someone with selfless intent could acquire it. This choice-based safeguard reaffirms the novel's central argument: intentions, not abilities, define worth. It directly opposes Voldemort's ideology, which prizes power and domination regardless of moral cost. Harry's ability to repel Quirrell through touch alone, the consequence of his mother's sacrificial protection, shifts the novel's discourse from the mechanical function of magic to its moral implications. The protection is not spell-based, it's love-based, making it an emotional and ethical shield. Dumbledore later affirms that such love is ancient and powerful, a magical force Voldemort cannot comprehend. This suggests that true protection and strength lie not in knowledge or force, but in compassion and sacrifice. Dumbledore's final explanations to Harry provide meta-commentary on the limits of knowledge. When asked about the deeper mysteries, such as why Voldemort sought him out or what lies beyond death, Dumbledore withholds complete answers, emphasizing that some truths are not yet ready to be understood. This decision reflects the book's position as the opening entry in a larger saga and points to a recurring motif: growth, both intellectual and emotional, comes gradually. The resolution of the school year, with Gryffindor winning the House Cup due to bravery and moral fortitude, reinforces the novel's narrative logic: courage, loyalty, and self-sacrifice are of higher value than academic excellence or cunning. Neville's last-minute award of points, for standing up to his friends, subtly reinforces the complexity of moral action. Heroism is not only about confronting external threats, but about having the integrity to uphold principles, even in the face of peer pressure. As a whole, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone functions as a foundational narrative. It introduces the wizarding world not merely as a fantasy setting but as a moral landscape. The lines between good and evil are established, yet blurred with hints of ambiguity, most notably through Snape, whose actions subvert initial assumptions. This ambiguity prepares readers for the moral complexity that will intensify in future installments. The book also begins to outline the mythic structure of Harry's role in the series, the orphan hero, marked by prophecy and shaped by loss, who must navigate fame, danger, and identity. Yet it is not Harry's fame or power that make him exceptional, it is his character. That lesson, embedded in the final confrontation, ensures that the series begins not with spectacle, but with meaning. Harry Potter's first year at Hogwarts ended with a quiet return to the Dursleys' doorstep, the Philosopher's Stone destroyed, and the world unaware of what had truly happened within the castle's hidden chambers. But while Harry's story was slipping into legend within his own world, another journey, equally unlikely, was just beginning in ours. As if passed from fiction into reality, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone had not yet reached the hands of a single reader. Its pages remained unseen, stored in the typewritten manuscript of a woman named Joanne Rowling. Like the boy she created, the book itself had lived quietly, unrecognized, rejected, overlooked, and waiting. It would take 12 rejections, a sliver of faith from a small publishing house, and a child's honest delight to crack open the door that had stayed closed to Rowling for so long. But as with all-powerful magic, the moment of transformation came quietly and without spectacle. A small advance, a limited print run, and a cautious hope, these were the building blocks of what would become a cultural upheaval. The same themes that filled the book's chapters, perseverance, courage, unlikely triumph, began to play out in real life. From modest beginnings in Bloomsbury's catalogue to the shelves of millions across the world, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone would soon become more than a debut novel. It would become a global story, shared across languages, classrooms, and generations. This is the story behind the story, the journey not of a boy wizard, but of the book that introduced him to the world. A tale not of dragons or wands, but of paper, ink, and belief. In the early 1990s, before there was a franchise, a fandom, or a film empire, there was simply a story, and a woman determined to tell it. Joanne Rowling, who would later adopt the pen name J.K. Rowling was an aspiring author with no publishing record, raising her infant daughter as a single mother in Edinburgh. The manuscript that would one day become Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone lived not on shelves or screens, but in a suitcase, stored, rewritten, and typed manually on an old typewriter, page by painstaking page. The origin of the story is now part of publishing lore. Rowling conceived the idea of a young boy who discovers he is a wizard while delayed on a train from Manchester to London in 1990. In her own words, the idea fell into her head. By the time the train pulled into King's Cross Station, she had already begun sketching the world that would soon become Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. But inspiration was only the beginning. Over the next 5 years, Rowling built Harry's world in fragments. Writing longhand in cafes while her daughter Jessica napped beside her, plotting backstories, inventing magical systems, and drafting character arcs for a 7-book series. The first book alone would undergo multiple rewrites. Her outlines were meticulously organized, with each chapter plotted on grids to maintain internal logic and continuity. The manuscript itself reflected her circumstances. Pages rewritten on scrap paper, edited by hand, and typed using a manual typewriter because she could not afford a computer. Rowling has since noted that this process was slow and physically taxing, but the effort gave the book its structure and depth. The world of Harry Potter was not written quickly or carelessly, it was refined word by word, often late at night or in snatched moments during the day. But beyond the challenge of writing, Rowling faced a greater barrier: getting published. At the time, the UK publishing industry was skeptical of children's fantasy fiction, particularly lengthy novels written for middle-grade readers. The idea of launching a multi-book series by an unknown author, especially a single mother with no previous publications, was commercially risky. When Rowling began submitting the manuscript in 1995, the rejections came quickly and uniformly. 12 major publishers turned her down. Some passed without comment. Others questioned the market viability of such a story. A few doubted children would want to read a book with such length or complexity. Others flatly dismissed fantasy as a trend that had passed. Yet Rowling persisted. She believed in the story, in the character of Harry, and in the world she had built. She did not rewrite it to fit market trends or editorial notes, she simply kept sending it out, hoping someone would see what she saw. That someone would arrive in 1996 in the form of a small, independent publishing house, Bloomsbury. It was here that the suitcase would be opened not for rejection, but for recognition. Even as the story of Harry Potter grew within the confines of J.K. Rowling's notebooks and typewritten pages, the publishing world remained indifferent. By the mid-1990s, the British literary market was saturated with contemporary realism and reluctant to embrace new children's fantasy fiction. Especially one with medieval overtones, magical boarding schools, and a page count nearly double the industry average for young readers. Rowling sent the manuscript of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone to one publisher at a time, per standard submission guidelines. Each copy was laboriously prepared, manually typed, sometimes photocopied, and accompanied by a cover letter. One by one, the responses arrived. And one by one, they said no. Some rejections were form letters. Others offered polite encouragement followed by a decline. A few questioned whether children would read a book of over 75,000 words with no illustrations. One publisher reportedly returned the manuscript without any written feedback at all. Despite the variety in response, the outcome was the same: Harry Potter would not be acquired. This string of rejections, 12 in total, was not unusual in the world of publishing. What was notable, however, was how consistent the rationale was. The manuscript was too long, too dense, or too whimsical to fit the current market. Rowling, with no literary agent at the time and no publishing connections, was advised by some editors to move on to a different kind of project. Despite this, she refused to give up. She continued revising the manuscript on her own terms and resubmitting it. During this time, she secured the representation of literary agent Christopher Little, whose agency specialized in commercial fiction but was willing to take on her work after reading a sample. It was Little who would repackage the manuscript and continue submissions on her behalf. Even under formal representation, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone continued to struggle. It wasn't until the manuscript landed on the desk of Barry Cunningham, a children's editor at Bloomsbury Publishing, that the story found its first true advocate. The manuscript had been passed to him as part of the agency's standard submissions batch. It caught his attention, but what solidified his interest wasn't just his own editorial instinct, it was the reaction of his 8-year-old daughter, Alice Newton, who read the first chapter and demanded the rest. Her immediate enthusiasm led Cunningham to take the risk. Still, Bloomsbury's initial offer was cautious: a £1,500 advance and a small print run of 500 hardback copies, only 300 of which were distributed to libraries. J.K. Rowling was advised not to quit her day job. It was, by industry standards, a modest and limited launch. But the 12th door, unlike the 11 before it, was not closed. And through it, the story of Harry Potter would take its first real steps into the world. In the summer of 1996, a single chapter in a pile of unsolicited manuscripts caught the attention of a small team at Bloomsbury Publishing. It was not a marketing committee or board of directors that would push this story forward, but the immediate reaction of one young reader. When literary agent Christopher Little submitted Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone to Bloomsbury, it reached the desk of Barry Cunningham, the head of the publisher's newly established children's division. Intrigued but cautious, Cunningham took the manuscript home. Curious about its appeal to its intended audience, he gave the first chapter to his daughter, Alice Newton, then 8 years old. Alice read the sample in a single sitting and immediately asked for the next chapter. Her demand was emphatic. This, for Cunningham, was decisive. Her enthusiasm provided the evidence that adult editors had overlooked, that a child reader could, and would, be captivated by a story of an 11-year-old boy discovering he was a wizard. Cunningham acted quickly. Bloomsbury offered Rowling a modest £1,500 advance, the publishing contract she had waited years to secure. It was a standard offer with no expectations of major commercial success. Despite the landmark moment, Rowling was advised to prepare for a slow start. Cunningham himself later admitted he told her, "You'll never make a fortune from children's books, Joe." The initial print run of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was just 500 copies, most destined for libraries and review outlets. Only 200 copies were made available for retail sale, printed in hardback in June 1997. These early editions, distinguishable by a misprint of 1-1 twice on the supplies list, would later become some of the most valuable books in modern literary history. The publisher made one editorial suggestion: J.K. Rowling should use initials instead of her full name on the cover, fearing that a book written by a woman might deter young male readers. Joanne Rowling, who had no middle name, adopted K for Kathleen, her paternal grandmother. With a new identity, a cautious publisher, and a slim marketing budget, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was officially released on June 26, 1997. Its entry into the market was quiet. There were no launch parties, no television campaigns, and no bestseller expectations. The book appeared on shelves like any other debut, unmarked, unheralded. But among children, librarians, and a growing number of booksellers, something was already beginning to stir. While Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone began quietly in the United Kingdom, its transatlantic journey would mark a pivotal moment in its transformation from a promising debut into an international phenomenon. That journey began with a publishing auction in the United States, and a title change that would spark debate among readers and scholars for decades. After the book's modest but promising debut in the UK in June 1997, word of its success began circulating within publishing circles. Positive reviews from children's literature critics, enthusiastic recommendations from teachers and librarians, and unexpected reorders from independent bookstores caught the attention of international scouts. The manuscript quickly landed in the hands of Arthur A. Levine, head of the children's division at Scholastic Incorporated, the largest publisher of children's books in the United States. Levine was immediately taken with the manuscript and lobbied aggressively to acquire U.S. publishing rights. Scholastic ultimately secured the deal in early 1998 with a $105,000 advance, a remarkably high figure for a debut children's novel. The bid signaled rising confidence in the book's appeal and Scholastic's commitment to a long-term investment. However, Scholastic insisted on one change: the title. Believing that American children might not associate the word philosopher with anything magical, the U.S. team proposed a new title, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Though reluctant, Rowling agreed to the change, prioritizing the book's entry into a larger market. She later expressed regret over the decision, acknowledging that the original title's alchemical meaning was lost in translation. The U.S. edition, published on September 1, 1998, included minor edits beyond the title. Britishisms were softened for American readers: jumper became sweater, mum became mom, and so on. Scholastic also revised certain stylistic choices and added chapter artwork. While the text remained mostly intact, these changes would spark ongoing conversations among readers about authenticity, localization, and authorial intent. Despite these alterations, the heart of the story remained untouched, and Scholastic launched the U.S. edition with significantly greater promotional resources than Bloomsbury's initial campaign. Advance copies were distributed widely, and Scholastic hosted early readings, press coverage, and retailer previews. The book's release was met with enthusiastic reviews and quickly appeared on school reading lists and recommended children's literature shelves. The title change may have softened the alchemical and philosophical underpinnings of the original, but it did not dampen enthusiasm. By the end of 1998, both editions, Philosophers in the UK and Sorcerers in the US, were accelerating in sales. The book's momentum was now unmistakable. 2 editions, 2 titles, 1 story. And the spell had only just been cast. What began as a quiet release with a limited print run soon gained traction through a force that no marketing budget can reliably predict or manufacture: word of mouth. Within months of its initial publication, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was no longer just a debut novel, it was a rapidly circulating secret among children, librarians, teachers, and independent booksellers. The first spark ignited in school libraries and local bookshops. Children who read the book passed it to friends, parents who read to their children began buying additional copies. Educators praised the book's imaginative world, moral clarity, and unusually high level of reader engagement. Librarians noted that children were not only finishing the book, they were reading it multiple times. The buzz built slowly but steadily. In late 1997, the book won its first major award, the Nestlé Smarties Book Prize, Gold Medal, in the 9 to 11 category. Rowling's acceptance speech was modest, but the recognition gave the book broader visibility within the UK publishing community. It soon appeared on Waterstones and Smithers Children's Bestsellers lists, and was shortlisted for the Guardian Children's Fiction Prize. Retailers began to notice something unusual. For a debut author with little fanfare, Philosopher's Stone was selling through every shipment, often faster than expected. Some stores that had only ordered a handful of copies soon placed repeat orders. The book was also being requested by name, often recommended from child to child, teacher to parent, or librarian to student. In the United States, Scholastic's early promotional efforts accelerated this process. They distributed advance reader copies to teachers, school librarians, and children's literature conferences. Book fairs, an institution in American schools, provided a powerful platform. Students were buying the book in growing numbers, and schools were asking for more copies. Scholastic Book Club flyers listed Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone as a featured title, further amplifying its reach. The tipping point came when the book appeared on mainstream bestseller lists, not just for children but also for adult readers. In 1999, the book became the first children's novel to appear simultaneously on both the New York Times children's and adult bestseller lists, prompting the Times to eventually create a separate category to accommodate the series. Behind the sales figures was a groundswell of enthusiasm rooted not in celebrity endorsements or national campaigns, but in reader experience. Children identified with Harry's isolation and discovery, while adults appreciated the book's structure, its moral undercurrents, and its potential for intergenerational enjoyment. By the end of 1999, the book had sold over 300,000 copies in the UK and over 1 million in the US. Bloomsbury had already authorized multiple reprints, and Scholastic increased its distribution numbers in response to demand. International translations began in earnest, with rights sold in dozens of countries, including France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. What had started as a quiet murmur between young readers had grown into a global conversation. Harry Potter was no longer just a book, it was becoming a movement. By early 1999, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was no longer just a critical success or a favorite among school children, it was a commercial force. Sales data across the United Kingdom and the United States showed the book moving from the margins of the children's sections into the mainstream of general publishing. It was clear, Harry Potter was now driving numbers that rivaled top adult fiction. In the UK, Bloomsbury's cautious 500-copy first print had already been reissued in multiple waves to meet demand. Within 18 months of its initial publication, the book had sold over 300,000 copies in Britain alone. By the end of 1999, it had become Bloomsbury's best-selling title to date. The paperback edition, released in 1998, expanded the book's accessibility and pushed weekly sales into the tens of thousands. In the US, the growth was even more dramatic. Scholastic's first print run of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, September 1998, was a confident 50,000 copies, a large figure for a debut children's title. When those sold out almost immediately, a second run followed, then a third. Within a year, over 3 million copies had been sold in the US market. Scholastic launched extensive reprints and expanded marketing to keep pace. Sales figures began to reflect the emergence of a new publishing phenomenon, a children's book that sold like an adult blockbuster. In some countries, Harry Potter outsold every other title on the market regardless of genre. Foreign rights deals were exploding. By the end of 1999, Philosopher's Sorcerer's Stone had been licensed in over 40 languages, with translation teams racing to publish editions across Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Data also began to show signs of repeat readership. Market surveys reported children reading the book multiple times, often out loud with family members. Adults began buying the book for themselves, prompting Bloomsbury to release a special adult edition in the UK with a more subdued cover to make it more appealing to grown-up readers. These editions sold strongly, particularly in airports and commuter bookstores. Bookstores also reported changing purchasing behavior. Independent sellers and large chains alike noted that buyers were now asking for Harry Potter by name, not browsing, but seeking. Some stores dedicated entire displays to the title, while libraries reported months-long wait lists. This demand also spilled into online retail. Amazon named Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone its #1 best-selling book of 1999, and the site quickly adapted to the series' growing influence by creating tailored promotions and early pre-order systems for sequels. Online fan sites, review forums, and mailing lists emerged to support new and existing readers. The series had become more than a literary success, it was now a cultural and commercial phenomenon. As the numbers rose, industry observers took note. Harry Potter began appearing in year-end reports, market forecasts, and strategic planning documents across publishing houses. Analysts debated whether this was a rare exception or the beginning of a new model, one in which children's fiction could shape, and even dominate, the global book market. But for readers, the metrics didn't matter. The numbers weren't the story was the story. And millions of people, across dozens of countries, were now holding the same book in their hands and turning to page one. As sales of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and Sorcerer's Stone in the US, surged globally, the mainstream media, initially slow to respond, began to take notice. What began as a literary curiosity quickly evolved into an unprecedented media event. The story of Harry Potter's success was no longer confined to book reviews and library journals, it became a fixture of television segments, national newspapers, radio interviews, and magazine features around the world. In the UK, features in The Guardian, The Times, and The Sunday Telegraph explored both the unexpected commercial success of the book and the reclusive author behind it. J.K. Rowling, who had spent years writing in cafes and living on public assistance, now found herself at the center of a media narrative that framed her as a kind of real-life Cinderella, her manuscript transformed from overlooked to unstoppable. In the United States, the New York Times, Time magazine, and Publishers Weekly all covered the phenomenon, with stories focusing on the sheer scope of sales and the unexpected demographic reach. Teachers were using the book in classrooms, parents were reading it aloud to children, and adults were buying the children's book for themselves in record numbers. Rowling, initially reluctant to step fully into the spotlight, began giving more interviews as public interest surged. Her intelligence, wit, and clarity of vision added to the fascination. She made it clear that Harry Potter was planned as a 7-book arc, already outlined and carefully plotted. This revelation gave fans something rare in publishing, the promise of a long-term journey with characters they had only just met. Children's literature was, for the first time in decades, at the forefront of cultural discussion. Harry Potter became a reference point in conversations about childhood literacy, imagination, and even morality in fiction. Educators praised the books for improving reading fluency, especially among reluctant readers. Libraries began organizing Harry Potter-themed events and reading programs. Scholastic and Bloomsbury both reported record levels of school and library engagement. In parallel, the media also began to recognize a growing secondary phenomenon, the fans. Early online message boards and fan clubs formed around the world, hosted on platforms like Yahoo Groups and GeoCities. Some focused on trivia, others on theories, and still more on organizing local meetups or school-wide read-alongs. While fan fiction had not yet exploded, early sites began posting stories inspired by Rowling's characters. By the end of 1999, Harry Potter had become a household name. The story was no longer traveling by word of mouth alone, it was being carried through airwaves, across headlines, and through digital channels still in their infancy. In a sense, the book had transcended its genre and even its format. It was no longer just a book, it was a cultural touchpoint. And as the media frenzy intensified, one industry in particular began taking serious interest: film. By the end of 1999, the publishing industry was no longer the only one tracking the meteoric rise of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. In Hollywood, producers and studios took notice of the explosive sales, intense public interest, and narrative potential of the story. Conversations that had once been confined to publishing circles quickly crossed into the world of cinema. And it was only a matter of time before The Boy Who Lived was headed to the big screen. The film rights to the Harry Potter series were hotly pursued, with multiple major studios expressing interest. Ultimately, Warner Bros. Pictures secured the rights in 1999, purchasing the film options for the first 4 books for a reported £1 million. The deal was negotiated through Rowling's literary agent, Christopher Little, and her film agent, Neil Blair. Importantly, Rowling retained a significant level of creative influence over the project, a rare stipulation for an author of a best-selling children's novel. Rowling's involvement would prove critical. She insisted that the film remain faithful to the tone and content of the books. Among her core demands, the film must feature a British cast to preserve cultural authenticity. Hogwarts and its world must be portrayed as visually grounded and rooted in the UK. The essential plot and characters could not be significantly altered. These conditions reflected Rowling's deep connection to her fictional universe and her unwillingness to compromise on its integrity. Warner Bros. Agreed, and with Rowling's blessing, development began on what would become one of the most ambitious children's film adaptations in cinematic history. The announcement of the film deal sent Harry Potter into a new phase of global visibility. Media outlets reported the acquisition with headlines like "Harry Potter Goes to Hollywood," and speculation began to swirl around casting choices, special effects, and directorial vision. For many fans, the idea of seeing Hogwarts, Diagon Alley, and the Mirror of Erised brought to life created anticipation that only added to book sales. Even in its pre-production phase, the film generated renewed demand for the first book, as new readers rushed to discover the story before it hit theaters. International translations accelerated to accommodate global anticipation. Booksellers began offering Harry Potter-themed promotions tied to movie news, and entire school districts integrated the novel into reading curricula in preparation for the film release. Meanwhile, Warner Bros. Worked quietly on assembling the creative team. Chris Columbus, known for Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire, was hired to direct. Steve Kloves was brought on to adapt the screenplay, and he would ultimately collaborate closely with Rowling to maintain narrative fidelity. Casting began in 2000, with open auditions held across the UK to find child actors who could embody Harry, Ron, and Hermione. As Rowling continued to write Book 4, Goblet of Fire, the first film was officially greenlit for release in late 2001. The film deal didn't just promise new heights for the franchise. It validated Harry Potter as a multimedia property with global reach. What had begun as a book typed on a borrowed typewriter had now evolved into a film series in the making, a licensing empire on the horizon, and a brand that would soon become one of the most recognized in the world. As Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone climbed bestseller lists and prepared for its cinematic debut, the book began facing a new kind of attention, one that went beyond sales figures and fan fervor. The literary establishment, educational theorists, and cultural critics turned their gaze toward the phenomenon, prompting a wave of formal critique. What had once been dismissed as just a children's book now required serious evaluation. In the UK, reviews had initially focused on the book's readability and clever world-building. Outlets like The Guardian and the Sunday Times praised Rowling's ability to capture the voice of a child protagonist while layering her story with classical fantasy elements. Critics highlighted the clarity of her narrative structure and the seamless integration of magic into everyday life. In the United States, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone received similarly enthusiastic coverage. The New York Times Book Review noted the book's rich imagination and charm without sentimentality, while publishers weekly applauded its brisk pace and inventive setting. Reviews across educational journals emphasized the novel's potential to reignite interest in reading among children, particularly reluctant readers. But not all voices were celebratory. As the book's profile rose, a more nuanced conversation emerged. Some critics argued that Harry Potter followed a predictable hero's journey and drew too heavily on familiar tropes: orphans, chosen ones, magical mentors. Others questioned whether the prose style was sufficiently literary to justify its growing status. A handful of scholars also examined the book through political and social lenses. Critics debated the representation of gender roles, class structures, particularly the contrast between Muggles and wizards, and the absence of racial diversity in the first novel. These critiques, while not universally shared, laid the groundwork for later academic engagement with the series as a whole. In educational circles, Harry Potter was widely embraced. Teachers reported measurable increases in student reading comprehension and motivation when using the book in the classroom. The structure of the story, with its clear moral lessons, layered character arcs, and accessible language, made it ideal for both independent and guided reading instruction. In 2000, Philosopher's Sorcerer's Stone was included in numerous national curriculum guides across the UK, the US, Canada, and Australia. Adult readers also entered the conversation. The release of the adult edition of the book in the UK, featuring a muted photographic cover instead of the original cartoon art, helped to legitimize Harry Potter as a book for all ages. It became increasingly common to see adults reading the novel on trains, buses, and in cafes, often unself-consciously. The publishing industry took note. Children's books were now crossing generational lines. Importantly, J.K. Rowling maintained a grounded presence in the midst of rising critical discussion. In interviews, she welcomed both praise and critique but reminded audiences that she wrote primarily for children, not for critics or cultural theorists. She was especially vocal about her commitment to storytelling as a tool for emotional literacy, encouraging young readers to explore ideas of courage, loss, and belonging through her work. By the close of 1999, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone had become more than just a bestseller. It was now a subject of formal analysis in classrooms, universities, editorial columns, and book clubs alike. The critical lens had widened, and the conversation was only just beginning. As Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and Sorcerer's Stone in the US gained momentum across classrooms, bookstores, and homes, it also began to face a force common to many influential works of children's literature: moral scrutiny. For all its commercial and critical success, the book would soon encounter censorship attempts, public protests, and formal challenges. Mostly centered on its use of magic, depictions of witchcraft, and perceived conflict with certain religious or cultural values. The first documented challenges to Harry Potter arose in American school districts, particularly in the southern and midwestern United States. Parents, religious leaders, and advocacy groups filed objections to the book's presence in school libraries and reading lists, citing the following concerns. Promotion of witchcraft or occultism. Critics claimed the series introduced children to spells, divination, and supernatural forces in a way that normalized or glamorized practices deemed spiritually inappropriate or dangerous. Moral relativism and defiance of authority. Some detractors argued that Harry's frequent disobedience of school rules and adult figures could encourage similar behavior in young readers. Exposure to the dark themes of the novel's treatment of death, violence, e.g. the deaths of Harry's parents, and conflict with evil was labeled by some as too intense for its intended age group. Organizations such as Focus on the Family and local church coalitions began issuing public statements warning parents against allowing their children to read the books. In some districts, school boards held hearings to determine whether the books should be removed from libraries or excluded from curricula. In others, children were required to obtain parental permission to check out a Harry Potter novel. The American Library Association began tracking these challenges. By 2000, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone ranked number 1 on the ALA's list of most challenged books, a position it would hold or appear near for several years. In the UK and other countries, censorship was less pronounced but not absent. In parts of the Middle East and Africa, concerns about the book's spiritual themes led to limited bans or import restrictions. In Russia and Eastern Europe, some conservative groups objected to what they saw as Western moral relativism embedded in the text. Despite this opposition, the backlash often had the opposite effect from what was intended. Public challenges generated intense media coverage, which in turn amplified curiosity and interest. Some bookstores even reported spikes in sales following publicized bans. For many readers, particularly children and teenagers, the controversy framed the books as something forbidden or rebellious, further enhancing their appeal. Rowling addressed these controversies directly in interviews. She asserted that the magic in the Harry Potter books was purely fictional and rooted in folklore, not a cult practice. She also emphasized the ethical framework of the books. Harry fights evil, shows loyalty, sacrifices for others, and upholds moral courage. To Rowling, accusations of moral corruption missed the point entirely. Literary defenders of the series pointed to long-standing traditions in Western storytelling. Tales of magic, from the Odyssey to the Chronicles of Narnia, were integral to cultural and religious heritage. Many educators and librarians viewed the backlash as a misunderstanding of allegory, fiction, and the role of imagination in child development. In the end, Harry Potter not only withstood the controversy, it grew stronger in its wake. The censorship debates helped establish the series as more than entertainment. It had become a cultural battleground, a mirror for society's evolving relationship with literature, childhood, and morality. As the Harry Potter series expanded beyond the page, the next wave of its cultural transformation arrived through commerce. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone had proven itself a literary juggernaut. Now it was becoming a merchandising empire. What began as a book in a suitcase was evolving into a global brand, complete with toys, games, clothing, collectibles, and cross-media partnerships. Following the Warner Brothers film deal in 1999, licensing activity around Harry Potter began accelerating. Both Bloomsbury and Scholastic worked with external licensing firms to identify commercial categories aligned with the franchise. These efforts, cautious at first, soon developed into one of the most recognizable product ecosystems in children's publishing history. Key categories included stationery and school supplies, notebooks, backpacks, pencil cases, and planners branded with house crests, Harry's lightning bolt scar, and Hogwarts iconography. Toys and collectibles, figurines, replica wands, plush creatures like Hedwig or Fluffy, and early board games themed after Hogwarts challenges and spells. Clothing and accessories, branded scarves, robes, and t-shirts became available in major retail chains, especially in the UK and US, allowing children to dress the part as they read. Calendars and posters, widely distributed through bookstores, gift shops, and school fairs. The licensing efforts were initially tightly controlled by J.K. Rowling and her team. Rowling was deeply protective of the Harry Potter universe and placed strict limitations on product quality and brand alignment. In interviews, she emphasized that she would not allow Harry to be used to sell fast food or unrelated products, a stance that, at the time, was highly unusual for a franchise entering mass-market merchandising. To support the expansion, Time Warner created an internal division to oversee brand integrity and merchandising consistency. The company's global reach enabled coordinated product rollouts alongside book and film releases, strengthening the feedback loop between media exposure and commercial success. One of the first major merchandising partners was LEGO, which acquired rights to produce Harry Potter-themed sets beginning in 2001. These products allowed fans to physically reconstruct scenes from the book, Diagon Alley, the Hogwarts Express, and the Forbidden Forest, linking literary imagination with hands-on play. At the same time, Scholastic and Bloomsbury ramped up in-house branded items. Bookstores began selling Harry Potter bookmarks, trivia card sets, and chapter-themed activity books. Some U.S. schools offered branded reading guides and house reading challenges to encourage literacy through engagement with the story world. Bookstores themselves adapted. Dedicated Harry Potter displays became the norm, and some shops created in-store common rooms for kids to read and discuss the books. As the sequels were announced, stores began experimenting with pre-orders, midnight release parties, and themed decor. A new model for literary engagement that would become a hallmark of the franchise. Importantly, Harry Potter merchandise retained an unusually book-centered focus. While film tie-ins were inevitable, the core brand remained loyal to the literary roots of the story, with Rowling repeatedly emphasizing the importance of the books themselves. The merchandise never overshadowed the source material, it existed to enhance the world readers had already begun to imagine. By the early 2000s, it was clear Harry Potter was no longer just a book series, it was a cultural brand, one that balanced narrative integrity with commercial scale. And behind that brand was the still expanding influence of the very first book. By the turn of the millennium, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was no longer a rising star, it was a verified literary phenomenon. With skyrocketing sales, international acclaim, and a growing cultural footprint, recognition from the publishing and literary worlds followed swiftly. The book began to break records, sweep awards, and cement its place in the canon of modern children's literature. The first wave of recognition came in 1997, shortly after the UK release. The book won the Nestlé Smarties Book Prize Gold Medal in the 9 to 11 age category, a prestigious UK children's award judged in part by child readers. Remarkably, Rowling would go on to win the Smarties Prize 3 years in a row, an achievement that had never been accomplished before. In 1998, the book won the British Book Award for Children's Book of the Year, and Rowling herself was named Author of the Year at the same event in 2000, an honor rarely awarded to a children's writer. In addition to national recognition, Rowling began receiving international accolades as translated editions gained momentum in dozens of countries. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was shortlisted for the Guardian Children's Fiction Prize, 1998, named a notable children's book by the American Library Association, 1999, included on countless Best Books of the Century lists, including Time, Newsweek, and School Library Journal in the United States. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone became the first children's book to top the New York Times bestseller list in the adult category. Its domination of the charts eventually prompted the Times to create a separate children's bestseller list in 2000 to give other adult titles a chance to compete. The list was launched with Harry Potter holding the top 3 positions, books 1, 2, and 3, simultaneously. Additional milestones included over 30 million copies of Book 1 sold globally by mid-2001, translation rights sold in over 60 languages, hardcover editions reprinted dozens of times within the first 2 years, the Guinness World Record for fastest-selling book series. When subsequent volumes were released, Rowling's impact was not confined to children's publishing. Her work redefined the boundaries of what was commercially and critically possible for middle-grade literature. Booksellers reported a Potter effect, with increased sales of other fantasy titles and renewed interest in long-form novels for younger readers. Academics also began to respond. The Harry Potter series was incorporated into university literature courses, studied for its mythological structure, moral themes, and socio-cultural commentary. It became a frequent subject of scholarly essays, dissertations, and conference panels, almost unheard of for a series still in active publication. Most notably, Rowling's success began to influence the business of publishing itself. Editors and agents who had once passed on Harry Potter now sought the next Rowling. This demand led to a surge in middle-grade and young adult fantasy acquisitions, including titles that may not have been greenlit in the pre-Potter era. And yet, through all the accolades, Rowling remained largely focused on her writing. In interviews, she expressed gratitude for the awards but emphasized her commitment to the story arc already unfolding in her mind. She rarely attended high-profile literary ceremonies, preferring to let the work speak for itself. In an industry often resistant to elevating children's fiction to the level of serious literature, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone broke through not just with readers, but with the institutions that shape what literature is valued and remembered. It didn't just sell well. It earned its place in history. The extraordinary success of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was never an endpoint, it was a catalyst. By the time the first book had broken through bestseller charts, earned international awards, and secured a film adaptation, it had already begun to serve its next and most important function, as the foundation for a long-running series. The launchpad effect of Book One fundamentally altered not only J.K. Rowling's career but the structure and priorities of children's publishing for years to come. From the earliest interviews following publication, Rowling was clear that Harry Potter was not a one-off. She had mapped a 7-book arc, one novel for each year Harry would attend Hogwarts. This long-term vision wasn't an afterthought, it was embedded into the fabric of the first book. Foreshadowed references to Voldemort's past, unexplained connections to Harry's scar, hints at prophecy, magical systems, and deep character histories. Readers returning to Book One after later volumes would find it laced with clues, demonstrating how fully Rowling had envisioned her fictional universe from the outset. The publication of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets in July 1998, barely a year after Philosopher's Stone, was met with eager anticipation. Pre-orders, a practice usually reserved for high-profile adult authors, surged into the thousands. Bookstores began planning launch displays months in advance. Libraries held release events, and children lined up with newly purchased copies of Book Two, often dressed in homemade Gryffindor scarves or wizard hats. Sequels had always existed in children's literature, but few series had seen such a spike in interest between first and second books. Chamber of Secrets sold 77,000 copies in the UK in its first year, more than double the first-year sales of Philosopher's Stone. In the US, Sorcerer's Stone had now solidified a fanbase that translated directly into a massive initial print run for Chamber, reportedly exceeding 250,000 copies on release. This early confidence in sequels marked a shift in the way publishers viewed series potential. Rowling's success demonstrated that young readers were not only willing to commit to long, complex stories, they were eager for serialized storytelling with deep continuity. Other authors and agents took notice. Publishers began actively seeking out multi-book fantasy arcs, and industry strategies began favoring longer-term investments in debut series. For Rowling, the growing demand created both opportunity and pressure. She continued to write full-time, now with the support of a legal and editorial infrastructure that had grown substantially since Bloomsbury's original 3-person children's division. Editorial feedback was minimal. Rowling's command of her own story world was now seen as a strength rather than a variable. By the time the third book, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, released in 1999, Harry Potter had become a publishing calendar event. Readers no longer discovered the books quietly. They waited for them. Retailers began preparing for Harry Potter Day. Pre-orders reached 6 figures. Scholastic and Bloomsbury adjusted logistics, printing and warehousing books in secret to prevent leaks. Embargoes were introduced to prevent early sales. Book 1 had created a readership, books 2 and 3 turned that readership into a generation-defining fandom. Rowling's careful character development and expanding narrative arcs ensured that interest didn't fade. Each new release pulled in new readers while deepening the attachment of existing ones. Meanwhile, Philosopher's Stone continued to sell. Far from fading behind its sequels, it remained a perennial bestseller, serving as the point of entry for latecomers to the series. By 2000, the first book alone had sold more than 30 million copies, with millions more in translation. The success of Book 1 had done more than launch a series. It had launched a new model of publishing, one in which a children's book could anchor an international franchise, define an entire decade of literary marketing, generate media coverage previously reserved for blockbuster films or political memoirs, build a readership that would grow with the books, year by year, character by character, and at the center of it all was a single manuscript that had once been rejected by a dozen publishers, and now stood as the cornerstone of the most successful book series in modern history. More than just the beginning of a story, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone became a cultural landmark whose influence rippled outward, across generations, across industries, and across borders. Its legacy is not measured merely in copies sold or awards won, but in how it transformed what a children's book could be and what the world expected from stories written for the young. By the early 2000s, the first Harry Potter book had been translated into over 60 languages, including Latin and Ancient Greek, an honor shared by only the most enduring works of literature. In Japan, it became the first foreign children's book to top national bestseller charts. In Germany, its first print run sold out in days. In China, bootleg translations circulated before the official edition even hit stores. Book 1 continued to sell at a steady pace long after its initial release. In fact, every new book or film release in the franchise drove renewed sales of Philosopher's Stone, as new generations of readers began their journey at the beginning. By 2015, the first book alone had sold over 120 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling books of all time, children's or otherwise. Its legacy was also visible in the reading habits of a generation. In schools across the globe, Philosopher's Stone became a gateway text. Literacy programs embraced the book for its vocabulary development, pacing, and emotional resonance. Teachers used it to teach structure, symbolism, and empathy. Children who had never finished a chapter book before devoured it in days. Harry Potter made readers of millions. The book also left its mark on publishing practices. Before Philosopher's Stone, most children's books were seen as mid-list material, important, but rarely lucrative. Rowling's debut rewrote that rule. Publishers now actively invested in high-concept middle-grade fiction, looking for series potential, fantasy world-building, and long-term character arcs. The era of the Potter-inspired publishing wave had begun, launching authors like Rick Riordan, Suzanne Collins, and Veronica Roth. In retail, the book reshaped how stores engaged with literature. Midnight release parties, pre-order campaigns, and dedicated display tables became standard. In libraries, the book was often the most borrowed title of the year for more than a decade. In homes, it became a shared text, read aloud between parents and children, siblings, and friends. Even outside literary circles, the impact was undeniable. Philosopher's Stone gave rise to theme parks, e.g., the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Academic conferences on Rowling's work, pop culture references across television, politics, and fashion, a new standard of world-building and continuity in commercial storytelling. Importantly, its legacy is not rooted in spectacle but in recognition, a shared understanding across readers that something had shifted. That magic had been reintroduced to literature in a form both accessible and profound. That bravery, friendship, and sacrifice could exist in stories written not to patronize children, but to speak to them honestly. As J.K. Rowling once said in a rare early interview, "I wanted to write the kind of book I would have wanted to read at 11. She did, and the world read it with her." Years after Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone first reached readers, its story remains not only relevant but foundational. Both within the fictional wizarding world it introduced and in the real-world narrative of modern publishing, storytelling, and cultural connection. With the benefit of hindsight, the book's unlikely journey reads as mythic as the story it tells, a single mother writing in cafes, rejected by 12 publishers, eventually creating the best-selling book series in history. The manuscript that once sat quietly in a suitcase is now enshrined in literary history, studied in universities, quoted in Parliament, and cherished in the bedrooms of readers young and old. But what endures most is how the book changed the world, not through noise, but through resonance. It reminded readers that stories could still be magical without being hollow, emotional without being sentimental, and moral without preaching. Philosopher's Stone didn't just tell children that they mattered, it showed them how to imagine, question, and believe. Its legacy is built not on hype, but on trust, the trust between writer and reader, between character and child. Rowling's voice invited readers to grow into the story rather than race ahead of it. It didn't pander or simplify. It asked young people to pay attention, to be brave, to look beneath surfaces, and to value loyalty and truth. From Platform 9 3/4 to the Forbidden Forest, the story's geography became emotional topography, a shared language for readers across continents. And while the franchise grew into films, theme parks, academic theses, and merchandise, its heart remained intact. The real magic was always in the words. Today, that first book continues to stand not just as a literary debut, but as a cultural lodestone. It is the portal through which millions entered the world of Harry Potter. And for many, the book that opened up the habit of reading itself. Its pages are reread, gifted, translated, quoted, and remembered. Not as trend. As text. It taught publishers that children's literature could be epic. It taught writers that rejection doesn't determine destiny. And it taught readers, once and for all, that books can be magic. It started with a boy in a cupboard under the stairs, and it changed the world. Over the course of 2 deep dives, we've explored the magic behind Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone from both sides of the page. First, in our chapter-by-chapter canon breakdown, we followed the journey of a young boy who discovers he's a wizard and is thrust into a hidden world of magic, mystery, and danger. From the cupboard under the stairs to the mirror that reveals the heart's desire, we tracked every spell, secret, and scar that shaped the beginning of a global story. Then, in our companion non-fiction book The Boy Who Sold the World, The Making and Rise of Harry Potter, we turned the lens to the real world, examining how J.K. Rowling's manuscript survived 12 rejections, how a child's recommendation at Bloomsbury changed literary history, and how a book written in cafes became the cornerstone of a billion-dollar franchise. Together, these 2 narratives form a complete portrait, one of a character, and one of a creation. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone didn't just launch a series, it reshaped modern storytelling. It transformed bookstores, school reading lists, the fantasy genre, and even how Hollywood approaches adaptation. Its characters became global icons. Its author became a household name. And its readers? They became part of something timeless. But the story doesn't end here. Want to dive deeper into the wizarding world? Be sure to check out Harry Potter Diary, a day-by-day account of Hogwarts Year 1 Inch, where we track the school year alongside Harry in real time. The Malfoy family legacy, bloodlines, ambition, and the cost of purity, a full character lineage and political analysis of the Malfoy dynasty. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like. It helps more witches and wizards find this content. Subscribe for full book breakdowns, character deep dives, and publishing secrets. Comment, tell us. What was your first memory of reading Harry Potter? And remember, every magical journey starts on page 1. Thanks for watching.